Welcome back, Daisy Cakes! I want to talk about Isaac Asimov's 1950 novel, Pebble in the Sky. Why? Because I am Daisy Ex Machina, the drag queen detective who investigates all things speculative in science fiction, fantasy, and horror. I picked Pebble in the Sky by Asimov from the nominees of the 1951 Retro Hugos, which is part of my TBR game. And the reason why I picked it was because I read all the other books, but while I was reading this, I got a little bit of deja vu, so I may have read Pebble in the Sky. If you don't know, it lost to Farmer in the Sky by Robert A. Heinlein. Now, if you don't know, Heinlein and Asimov, along with Arthur C. Clarke, were known as the big three science fiction writers up through the 70s. I personally prefer Heinlein out of all of them, and the reason why, especially for his juvenile books like Farmer in the Sky, is his focus was more on the characters. You know how Stephen King, at least for me, the reason to read Stephen King isn't necessarily about the horror plots, but it's about his deep dive into characters. They really come to life. That's what I think Heinlein offers. But anyway, this is about Isaac Asimov. He's one of those golden age authors who mostly wrote shorter fiction. Why? Because it was more lucrative. Like a lot of his work back then, which started as shorter fiction, this was a novella originally titled Grow Old With Me, which was a line from a Robert Browning poem, Rabbi Ben Ezra, but he couldn't sell this short version to the pulps for whatever reason. Eventually, he did find someone who wanted to publish it, Doubleday, which was a bookseller, and this was only under the condition that Asimov expand the story from 40,000 words to 70,000 words. So yes, this made Pebble in the Sky the first full-length novel that Asimov wrote. Now, Asimov did change the title from Grow Old With Me to Pebble in the Sky. Pebble in the Sky, by the way, is the Earth. And if you've seen my Asimov video, you know that he was a Russian Jew who immigrated as a child during the turn of last century. And during that time, he encountered a lot of racism as a young man. For example, he was rejected from a college he applied to because they had already met their quotas for Jews. Apparently, there were a lot of ethnic quotas in colleges way back then. The theme of Pebble in the Sky is mostly about racism. Another interesting thing is Pebble in the Sky is based in the Foundation universe. Like, have you ever wondered, if you've seen the Foundation series or read the books, what about Earth? Well, this tells a story of how Earth fits into the galactic empire, and apparently there was a lot of prejudice against native Earthers, since Earth was considered this backwater planet because there was so much radiation and they had some sort of backwards thinking. Now, on Earth, because of the radiation and the harsh environment and the limited resources, people were euthanized at the age of 60, which they called the 60, because they could no longer be productive. Now, Pebble in the Sky is about a current man in his current for Asimov in the 50s or 40s, named Joseph Schwartz, who retired at the age of 62 and plans to enjoy life with his daughters and grandchildren and his wife. Life is good. Now, Schwartz is walking down the streets of Chicago on a nice, bright, sunny day, not knowing that across town in a science lab, a couple of chemists are playing around with uranium. Of course, accidents happen, and Schwartz, who, like I said, is all the way across town, it's caught up in some sort of this quantum wave, this uranium radiation accident, but he is transported thousands of years into the future. Now, he's mistaken as someone who is mentally deficient because he can't speak the language. Also, He looks old, so he must be near the time of the 60s. So he is the perfect candidate for scientific experiments. Of course he is. He undergoes a surgery on his mind, and the surgery gives him these super mental powers. Now, those who have read Asimov may recognize that these powers are what will eventually occur in the Foundation universe in the far future with the mule and whatnot. But anyway, the experiment is performed by Dr. Afrit Shecht and his daughter Pola, and they're weirded out that Schwartz's body seems to be uninvolved, like he's growing hair on his face and his chest. No one does that in the future. His appendix is larger than anyone else's, and his skull looks a little funny shaped. Now, while all this is happening, there's an archaeologist from off-planet, one of the galactic citizens that look down their nose at Earthers, but he doesn't think he's that type. But he has this outrageous theory that Earth is the birthplace of humanity. And he crosses paths with Pola, and they all get entangled in this plot that could threaten the galaxy. Now, for me, the interesting thing is this deep dive into prejudice and racism, especially when the galactic citizen, the non-Earther, thinks he's not racist and loudly proclaims how he's not racist, but then has to suddenly come to terms with and recognize that maybe he is holding on to some stereotypes. It felt like something that Asimov really thought about and explored deeply. It's really interesting in my opinion. Now, Asimov has been criticized about the lack of romance subplots in a lot of his work. Well, Pebble in the Sky has a romance subplot. Pola and Arviden, the Earther and the non-Earther, apparently fall madly in love on this 20-minute train ride. So there's a romance plot. Let's just leave it at that. Overall, I enjoyed Pebble in the Sky. It may not be my favorite of Asimov's books. My favorite is probably The Gods Themselves. But if you're a fan of the Foundation series and were wondering, well, what happened to Earth? Pebble in the Sky answers that. Also, if you're just a fan of Asimov, this is the first story he wrote as a full-length novel, so that's really interesting. Like I said, I really enjoyed this novel, but what about you? Have you read or do you want to read Pebble in the Sky? Let me know down in the comments, and while you're there, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Until we meet again, may all the books you read be blessed.